Hey everyone, my name is Brad, and the topic I've chosen to do for my presentation is childhood obesity, with my intervention question being, do school-based programs prevent childhood obesity? So just a bit of the content of what I'll talk about, the reasons for choosing the topic, the search strategy I used, the available evidence, the quality of the evidence, sources of bias and limitations, the outcomes, and the lessons learned from the review. So there are a number of reasons that I decided to choose this topic. First and foremost, it well and truly falls into my discipline of public health, and fitness and healthy lifestyle in general is something I've focused a lot of my studies in public health around. So childhood obesity is a major issue on the public health agenda at the moment. While other major issues, such as smoking rates, are decreasing, the same can't be said for childhood obesity rates, which have almost doubled over the past few decades, according to the World Health Organization. In 2012, over one-third of children and adolescents were overweight or obese. The negative effects of obesity are large and well known. In the immediate term, it increases the risk of things like cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure and cholesterol, and it increases the risk for developing diabetes. And children and adolescents who are overweight are also at a much greater risk of developing bone and joint issues. It also affects the child's social aspect, with being overweight or obese can lead to a poor school life, with things like bullying becoming an issue. This then, of course, transpires into adult life, with children who are obese being much more likely to continue to be when they become adults. In turn, this also leads to increased risks of problems in later life, such as heart disease and an array of cancers. So due to this, I wanted to see if tackling obesity at a younger age through the use of school-based interventions was effective in reducing obesity rates. So the search strategy. The search strategy I used to acquire the 3 reviews I used was just through searching a number of databases I knew of. The first database I searched was the Cochrane Library, which is a collection of databases which focuses on medicine and healthcare. I found 2 of the reviews I used here, and this was the best source I used for finding systematic reviews. The second place I looked in my search was through the University of Canberra Library, where in the subject guide section I searched public and environmental health and used the academic search complex database. From there I once again just searched keywords. I didn't acquire any of my reviews from here, as a lot of the ones I found in there were not systematic reviews and were also a lot older intervention studies. The third place I searched, and the place where I found my final review, was via PubMed, which is a free search engine that taps into the Medline databases, which is another major database for science and health reviews. I also included Google Scholar in my search for reviews, however I did not use anything I found there. So the levels of available evidence. So the levels of available evidence for school-based childhood obesity interventions was quite large, as it is quite a common intervention issue and a broad topic. Due to this, I did find 3 level 1 systematic reviews to use. Some of the major issues with the available evidence, however, were the lack of extremely up-to-date reviews, with the vast majority of reviews I found being 10 or more years old, hence a lot of them were not really feasible to use. But overall, it wasn't particularly difficult to find 3 systematic reviews, as there is an abundance of reviews and on interventions in the topic area. So the quality of the evidence and some limitations. Overall, the quality of the evidence for the intervention through the 3 reviews I looked at was mixed, with all of them showing signs of the intervention working to some degree. However, there were a lot of limitations associated with the evidence found. The 3 reviews found a lot of common themes and issues with the quality of evidence. These were things such as large amounts of the interventions reviewed had lack of blinding in a number of areas, meaning that a lot of the participants and providers in the studies were aware of the aims and goals of the interventions, which could have led to bias. The outcome measures that were used in a lot of the studies reviewed was self-report data. This can obviously lead to errors in the accuracy of the data collection, as data that is self-reported can often be misleading, as participants or administrators tend to over-exaggerate certain results or hide results for certain reasons. There is also just the sheer fact that through self-report data, some facts and results may be forgotten or left out. The use of actual medical tools to measure certain things, such as accelerometers to measure physical activity levels, and devices used to measure blood cholesterol and blood pressure, although these were used in a number of the studies, these were not used on a large enough scale throughout the interventions. There was also a lack of reporting on performance measurement outcomes. A lot of the studies were also heterogeneous, meaning it was hard to grasp a general view of what results were considered good or bad due to a lot of the participants and the schools in the interventions taking place under a number of timeframes and a number of different circumstances. However, despite these limitations, all of the reviews came to the conclusion that there was at least a certain degree of evidence that suggested that a school-based intervention worked in some areas of preventing obesity and that they should be continued. So the sources of bias. From the quality of the evidence that I just talked about, the main sources of bias can be seen as the self-report data, as this data can be exaggerating and misleading. The lack of blinding, as individuals who know what are being tested are more likely to try and attain a positive result. There were also attrition rates for a number of the studies and some incomplete data. Participants or administrators dropping out of studies is likely to bias the study towards a positive result also. So this leads me to the reported outcomes. So I'm just going to give a brief outline of what each review actually was, as time is a factor, and I want to focus more on the actual results of each one. So the first review I looked at focuses on 44 studies with 36,593 participants from across the globe, with the main focus was on physical activity promotion in schools for children aged 6 to 18 as a means of counteracting obesity. No distinction between male and female participants, with percentages rarely going beyond 60-40. So there were 5 key areas focused on in this review. These were time watching television, physical activity rates, physical activity duration, mean systolic and diastolic blood pressure, and body mass index. So the outcomes from this first one, these were mixed, with strong evidence showing that time watching TV and physical activity levels were both positively affected by the intervention. However, the other 3 areas found little or no evidence that suggested the intervention worked. So the second review looked at had 38 studies which focused on physical activity and diet interventions, as opposed to the first one just looking at physical activity promotion as their basis for counteracting obesity. This was for children aged 5 to 18. So of the 38 studies, 3 were diet only based, 15 were physical activity only based, and 20 were a combination of the two. The outcomes from this one were that 1 out of 3 of the diet studies showed weight decreases from the intervention group compared to the control group, 5 out of 15 did the same for the physical activity group, and 9 out of 20 did the same for the combination group. So overall, at least 30% of the interventions in each group had strong evidence that it was effective in reducing obesity, and that overall that using the combined approach of having an intervention that targeted physical activity and diet is the most effective in preventing obesity. So the third review I looked at, this was similar to the second one in that it had the same intervention description of having diet studies only, PA studies only, or a combination. However, this one focused on a different demographic, with the intervention done in low and middle income countries. So yeah, there were 25 interventions reviewed, 4 of which were diet only, 10 were physical activity only, and 11 were a combination of the two. Overall, the data from this review was the strongest to support the intervention, with 82% of all the studies reporting a positive effect on one of the major outcomes measured. So the lessons learned and that can be taken from the review of the literature can mainly be seen through the quality of the evidence and what can be done to improve future interventions in the topic area. So in order to have a school-based obesity intervention that can be accurately interpreted and work most effectively, the need for process evaluations is a must. This is something that was lacking throughout most of the studies. Knowing how results are attained is a must, and how the intervention was done in a step-by-step process, how people were put in control or intervention group, and evaluating what measures worked and which ones didn't is essential for future interventions. Consistent and more accurate outcome measures is also necessary, with too large of a dependence on self-report data, which, as I talked about, can lead to major bias, and inconsistencies between how things are measured. The use of more medically sound and accurate tools for measuring things, like weight differences and difference in vital signs, is also a must in attaining the most accurate data. From the 3 reviews, the strongest evidence was found in the third review that focuses on areas with a lower socioeconomic status. So just hypothesizing as to why this may be, this could be due to the fact that a lot of the children in these studies would, because of their socioeconomic status, they lack a lot of the technology tools that the other studies had, such as social media, video games, and things along these lines. So due to this, they may be more inclined to continue the physical activity trends outside of school hours, not only as a means of healthy lifestyle, but also as a means of enjoyment and social activity. This wasn't evidence-based, this is just something that I think might be an interesting topic of research for the future. So overall, the lesson learned is that there is enough evidence to suggest that school-based programs have a positive effect on preventing obesity, but much more in-depth research is needed into them. And here's just a reference list which has all 3 of the reviews I used if anyone's interested in looking at those. Thank you for listening.